So this video is an explanation of how parenting works in Blender and then how armatures work in Blender. So first of all, there is such a thing in Blender called parenting, which I'm sure you're already familiar with. If I just make a second cube here, I can tell this cube, which is currently independent of that cube, I can tell this cube to follow this cube by selecting it and shift selecting the other cube, holding Control and pressing P. Blender will then say what kind of parent would you like this to create, and I'll just say an object parent. Now there's a relationship line between the two of them, and the one that I selected second is now the parent of the one that I selected first. Now if I were to animate this, if I just do a rotation from 1 to 20, just rotate it moving up like that, put another keyframe there, you can see that the child will follow the parent wherever it goes, but the child's not the child is able to move on its own as well. So if I was to come over here and just lay a keyframe there and then say at frame 13, just say that it moves over there like that, I should put auto key on really. You'll see that the child can still go over there by itself whilst the parent is rotating the child in that direction. So really a good way to think about these things is everything is just one item inside a box, because there are different modes in Blender. So if you click on this right now, you're clicking on the object, and you can see that up here in the graph editor. It's an object and it's called cube. But inside cube there is also another object, which isn't actually an object at all. It's a mesh. It's a group of vertex points, and that group of vertex points moves independently, or should I say it can move independently of the object. So if I put that there and come back out, you can see the pivot point for the object is still there, and you can see these things in the outliner. So that's object there, but if I drop this down, you can see there, that's the mesh that is underneath the box that is called cube. Hopefully that made a bit of sense, and it's important to know that because that then explains how armatures work. So if I was to say, undo this a little bit, come back out here, if I take this camera and object parent it underneath there, that'll follow it wherever it goes. And then if you have a look in here under cube, now as well as, so cube, the object, has the mesh cube under it, but now it also has the camera under it too, and it might as well have the light as well. So now this cube is the parent for all of these things and moves them everywhere. So armatures just take this to another level. So if I go to new and make a new scene like this, I've got I've got a cube there. Let's get rid of the camera and get rid of that. I'm going to put this on X-ray mode so we can see through it, and I'll just add an armature object. So the armature object is there now. Right, so I can take this cube and I can shift select this armature. I can press Control P just like before, and I can press object, and it'll do exactly what you'd expect. The cube object has now been placed underneath the armature object, and wherever the armature goes, the cube will follow. But there's another way to parent this, which gives you a little bit more control. So if I undo this and take that cube back out of the armature box, and instead shift select the armature, a little golden rule here is you click on the object that you want to be parented, and then the last object you select will be the parent. So this one. Control P. I can do an armature deform, and I can use automatic weights, empty groups, or envelope weights, but we're not looking to those now. Let's just do automatic weights. So if I move this around now as an object, if I can click it, it will follow it around, and the cube is currently underneath there. But the way this is working is via a modifier which has been added here called the armature modifier, and you can see that that armature modifier that has been applied to this cube is following the object that's called armature. If I untick that or unselect that and move that around, you'll see it's still moving because it's an object. But if I take this out like that and move this around, you'll see it gets left behind. But if I come down here to the modifier that I placed on the cube and tell it to stick to the armature, when I move this around, you'll see nothing happens. But you go into pose mode and click on this, you'll see it follows. So there's two separate types of parent going on there. There's a modifier parent called an armature, and there's an object parent. So when you do your parent, Blender will do both. It'll just assume that when you move that armature around as an object, you want the cube to follow it. But sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. Normally I would say just leave it in there, because it can get confusing, so just put that back in there. I just think it's important to make that distinction. So let's just talk now. Let's just talk now about what is happening. How is this moving around with that? And the answer is vertex groups. So if you click on this square, this cube, and you come down here to your object data properties, you're going to see a vertex group called bone. Now that's no coincidence. This here, bone, is the name of this joint. If you press F2, you can see it's called bone. So if I just change that to joint, come out, and then click on this cube, you'll see that the vertex group has now been called joint. Now, what's underneath this group? Well, it's each vertex point of this object. They're all underneath this group. I can take them out and I can put them in again. So at the moment the weight is on 1. Let's just say I'm going to take that off, so remove. So now these vertex points that I've selected, I've hit remove, they've left this group. So if I come back out of edit mode now and go into pose mode and have a look at this, move it around, they're being left behind because they've been taken out of the group, whilst the other vertex points are still there. Let's just do that again. There we go. Let's take a hold of this, go to edit mode, select them all, select joints and click remove. Now none of them are in there, so when I move this around, nothing happens. However, go back again, select this, go to edit mode and select all of these vertex points and assign them all to that. Come back out of edit mode, click on the joint, go into pose mode, grab the joint, move it around, and everything follows. So that's what's happening. That's how that works. It's a modifier that is on the cube called the armature modifier. The object has been chosen. It's the armature object. And then the vertex groups are being used to assign each vertex point to this bone. What happens if you have two bones? If you come in here into edit mode of your armature and duplicate it, now there's two bones. What happens now? If I move this around, it still follows it because that bone's got nothing to do with any of this. But if I go into edit mode, select this bone, let's just call this joint O2. That will now appear in the vertex groups of this, except it's not there. And the question is why? And that is a simple answer, because you haven't added it. It wasn't there when we created this, and it hasn't been added yet. However, it is there under the armature. But if you remember, when we attached this cube to this joint, we clicked on automatic weights. I'll just remind you what that looked like. So if I come to there and shift select this, Control and P, we clicked on automatic weights. So it automatically assigned the vertex groups for us. But we've just now, after the fact, made a new joint. And Blender didn't automatically assign that, so you have to do that yourself. So if you click on this and come into edit mode and look at this, say what's it called? It's called joint O2. I'll take a copy of that. I'll come out of here, I'll go to the cube, and I'll come to the vertex groups here, and I'm going to add another vertex group. And I'm going to call it joint O2. So now it's been added. If I go into edit mode, I can select, say, this side, so these vertex points here, and I can say to Blender, assign with 100% weight these vertex points to that joint O2, assign. But I also need to tell Blender to remove those vertex points from joint 1, so remove. I'll now come out of edit mode, click on this, go into pose mode, move that one around, they're being left behind. Move this one around, they're going with it. So now you have two joints controlling one object. And that is really that is the fundamental principle behind armatures. What happens if we say to Blender, if we say to this cube, these vertex points here, have them half follow, so 0.5, have them half follow this joint, assign, and have them half follow that joint, assign. Now, when this one moves, it'll be pulling them, but only at 50% of the, what would you say, speed, with 50% of the influence. The other 50% belongs to this one. So you can have this effect where it's half and half, and it's being shared, dispersed, distributed evenly over different joints. Right, so that's a cube. That's all well and good. Hopefully that made good sense. If I get rid of these now and just get rid of this cube, let's do something else. Let's make a grease pencil object. So I'm just going to come up here and just start in grease pencil to make my life a bit easier. I'm going to come into pencil. I'm just going to use the pencil. I don't need to use anything overly fancy. So we'll just say that's my object. Make something a bit easier actually. That's my object there. And I'll come to object mode. There it is. Grease pencil object exists. I'm just going to hide this so it's not in the way. And I'm going to go Control A, make an armature. That's now there. I'll go into edit mode, and I'll put this just here at the center. Or I may have left that where it was and moved the grease pencil to the center just to keep things a bit cleaner. But it's the same game again. You can select this, you can shift select this, and Control P. You can then tell Blender to assign it with automatic weights. Now in pose mode, wherever this goes, whatever, in this case it's followed a radius, but wherever this goes, the armature object will follow. So this again works the same way as the cube. You can give this a click, go to edit mode, select everything like this. You want to be on vertex points just so you can see. You can come over here to where your object data properties are, and then you can come down here to vertex groups, and hey presto, you'll find the same thing that you found before, bone. So you can now choose what weight you'd like to assign. Let's just say 100%. Click assign, come back out of object mode, come back into pose mode, and move this around. And look at that. It's now following it everywhere. So let's do something that's a bit more, I don't know, challenging. Let's delete that armature object. Let's make a new one. Oh, sorry, I'm in edit mode. Come out of edit mode. And we'll delete this armature as an object. We'll make a new one, armature object. The reason I did that was just to wipe away any other stuff that I may have forgotten about. I won't move this around as an object. I think it's best to just leave that where it is so that it's got 0 transforms. Because if you move objects around, you start adding keyframes and adding transforms and stuff gets messy very quickly. Just leave that where it is. Go into go into edit mode and move it around there instead. So I'll put that there. I'll just grab this, G, put it there, press E for extrude, E, 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 and just keep going until you've made a nice joint chain that's going to follow this around. Da, 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 da. If you decide I should have put an extra one in, just right click and hit subdivide and it'll add one in the middle like that. Right, cool. Come out, select the object first, shift select the parent second, Control P with automatic weights, click on the armature, go to pose mode, grab these, make sure you've got your individual origins ticked, and move around. Hey presto, we've got control now of our grease pencil object, but we've got control of it as an armature. And more importantly, we can animate this in object mode. But we still have, I'll just do a bit of animation actually. If I click on this, just add a keyframe there. I'm on grease pencil at the moment. Let's go back to dope sheet so I can see. Go to 21 and we'll just unravel this like this. Let's just say we'll go to there. I'll just put my endpoint, control end. Let's have a look at that. Very cool. Wonderful, right? And control tab to come out of that. I'll just hide this armature at this point. So H, But now I can still go back into this at the grease pencil level. So I can go back to draw mode, and this object's here and it still exists just as a normal grease pencil object. So I can go and do everything that you can do to, in grease pencil mode. I can tint it greens and blues. I can add the wonderful modifiers that we've got. Yeah, sorry, I completely lost my train of thought there and what I was doing. So we'll just add the noise modifier as an example. Just turn the strength up a bit, turn the thickness up a bit. And now we've got a really nice, what would you call it, mixed media, blended, just experimental thing. But again, I can still continue to just alter this and say, I'm not a big fan of it actually. Let's have a look at this again. Let's go into sculpt mode, perhaps smooth it out a bit, because it's a little bit, that's actually the that's the noise. Yeah, sure, let's just say we decided to make that kind of change instead. Perhaps smooth it out a touch in towards the end. And we can do that. We can make those kinds of changes and it's fine. It's still attached to the armature as it was. But have you noticed something? I've keyframed it on the grease pencil layer, so it's changed those noise changes that I made to it using the sculpt brush tool have applied on grease pencil frame 15. So it's still the original thing there, but then on grease pencil frame 15 it's gone and changed into this. I might have moved that there so it's a little bit more. But I guess the point I'm trying to make is you can animate this on the grease pencil layer and you can still have it bound to an armature on the object layer, and then you can animate it in pose mode in one way and you can build on top of that animation in grease pencil mode in another way. And it's very flexible and it's all going to work just as you'd expect. But then of course when you're in object mode you can start to really experiment and get some cool stuff. So if I add the sphere into my scene, take the object that is the armature, perhaps I'll just rotate that 90 degrees on the x-axis and place it there, and shift click that and parent that under that. Now I've got a head that has that on top of it. I'll just hide the armature again, and perhaps I'll just put a keyframe there and a frame, I'll say frame 60. Take that over there. Looks good. Set my in and out point properly. And look at that. We've got this really cool hybrid animation now where it's moving in object mode. It's also a grease pencil object that's got the grease pencil noise modifier causing a boil effect. And it's also animating on the grease pencil layer. So yeah, possibilities are endless here and lots that you can do.